Hey everybody, it's PJ from Wisconsin Air Gunners, and in this video we're going to be putting a Mark II Crown from FX into a Saber Tactical Chassis. Now this is the updated Mark II version of the chassis. I've previously done an install video on this before, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about the differences between the two. Now at the beginning of the video, probably the first thing you should know is that this chassis is a limited run. There are, I believe, 100 of these out there, or going out there, and I don't know that there'll be another version released after this. So if you want one of these and you've been sitting on the fence, my advice to you is that you get off the fence and you get to your favorite Saber Tactical dealer and snatch one up as soon as you can, because I have a feeling that when these are gone, these are going to be gone. So let's talk about differences between the original chassis and this one. And there are a couple of differences. First, you're going to notice up front, the ARCA section on this is different. It is wider. It has a bigger flat surface on the bottom. It has gone away. There is no Picatinny out front, and it also is optimized for a 580cc bottle. In fact, this front end ends just after the bottle, so that you could use this as a barricade stop if you wanted to, and still be in position to protect your bottle. It is full-length ARCA with M-LOK on the side. It also has cutouts for quick detach sling mounts if you wanted. And on the bottom, up front here, there's a little screw hole, and it comes with a pair of these, what look like little threaded plugs, but they have like a plastic or Durlin spacer. And what that's for is to go into this hole, and you can screw that in so it butts up against your tank, so that any amount of flex in this front rail can be completely eliminated for competition shooting. In addition, one of the criticisms of the original chassis was that you could rotate your safety switch a full 180 degrees. In fact, you could probably rotate a little more than that in some cases. They've put a pin in the chassis so that you get a firm stop and you can't over rotate that. And then finally, what I would say is probably the biggest change and really upgrade. I would say this front end is a change, and you might like it, or you might want that Picatinny, but this is what it's changed to now. But the lockup on the buttstock is significantly improved. And in fact, it's not only improved, and when I say improved, what I mean is it is easier to open and close, and the lockup is significantly tighter. So you have a significant improvement in how rigid this is, and it's easier to open and close. Plus, when you've got it open, there's a side button here that allows you to fully disconnect without any tools, and then very easily reconnect. So that's a little bit of an overview of some of the features of this second generation of the stock. Let's get into the removal from either your laminate stock or your walnut stock or your GRS stock or your sporter stock, the soft touch finished, and let's get it into this chassis. It takes just a few minutes, and in terms of tools, you're going to need a set of Allens, and then I always recommend a magnetic parts tray, because there are some very small parts that are going to drive you crazy if you lose them. So make sure your work surface is clean, make sure your rifle is unloaded, and let's get to work. The conversion process starts with the rifle in its stock. Original stock? we'll go stock. You might ask yourself, why would I take it out of such a beautiful stock? And there's a number of reasons for that. One, you might want to protect this and not have it out knocking around in the field. Or you might want to shoot off a tripod, and it's challenging with the laminate stock to mount an ARCA plate for that, though you could go with a bottle clamp. Unfortunately though, for tripod shooting, the weight is back because the attachment point is forward, and on the chassis, we're going to have an ARCA rail that goes basically back to the trigger guard. So that might be a reason. You also might want to take your crown out for PRS competition. And again, you might not want to damage this, and there's some additional functionality for competition in the chassis. So whatever your reason, and it might just be Wednesday and you want to switch things up, whatever the reason, there are really 4 things you have to take apart in order to get this. And again, I'm strongly recommending the presence of a magnetic parts tray because we're going to get to some really small parts. So first thing to do, after you've made sure that the rifle is unloaded and safe and it has no pellets in it and all that, is you need to remove the safety switch. I would recommend you grab the correct Allen wrench for that, and what you need is a 2.5. So that screws out, and nice thing about that is the screw on the stock safety switch is captive, so you're not likely to lose the screw. But whatever you do to put away and protect your stock, keep this with it. You'll be using a different selector switch which comes with your chassis kit. These two do not work the same. They work the same. This one is longer to go through the wood body and the one on the chassis kit is shorter. This barrel is shorter. So whatever you do, don't lose this. You can then flip the rifle over, and we need to take off the power wheel. I recommend setting this, I usually set it to max when I do this. It doesn't really matter, but this one actually is a 2mm. So take your 2mm Allen, and we're just going to unthread this. Now, when you get to the point where that screw is all the way out, underneath here, there are 2 tiny ball bearings, steel ball bearings, and that's what works the detent system. And then under those ball bearings are 2 little tiny springs. And it is super easy to lose any or all of those. Now, when I pull this out, there's some lubricant in there, and it is likely that those ball bearings will stick to the wheel. We'll see how that goes. And they did, but the screw fell out. So screw, magnetic parts tray. Wheel with little ball bearings, magnetic parts tray. And then because we're going to be rotating this rifle back and forth while we do this installation, and while the springs are in there now, it would be super easy for those springs to fall out and go who knows where, and then you lose the functionality, or you have to find little teeny tiny springs. So I've got like a little dental pick here. It's really easy to pull these out. And again, magnetic parts tray. These are steel springs, so they will stick to the bottom of that tray, and you will not be scouring your floor to try to find them. So we're in the home stretch as far as disassembly of the stock. We just have 2 screws to take out. These use a 3mm Allen. And then you can carefully separate the stock from the action of the rifle. Now, I mentioned before, we have a 580 bottle on the stock, and that is the length of bottle that the chassis is really built for. You can use a 700cc bottle. It will just stick out farther than the end of the Arca rail, and you can certainly use a 480 bottle. It will just set, well, I won't set back here. A 480 probably ends about here, so the front of the chassis will stick out a little bit farther. As far as using that as a barricade stop, probably provides a little bit more protection. I don't know that I think the look is really great because the bottle just doesn't seem like it goes long enough. So really set up for a 580 bottle. All right, so we can take this, set it aside for a moment, and grab the chassis and start preparing it for the installation. Hold that for a second before we put this away and get started on the chassis. There are three things that are going to be critical to your ability to reinstall this on the crown. You have 2 bolts, one long and one short. Each bolt has a bushing. It's this brass piece. These are not affixed to the stock, so you need to make sure you put these in a Ziploc bag or something so that you always keep them with the stock, because without them you're not going to be able to reinstall. And then remember what I said before about the safety switch. This is the longer safety switch, and you need to make sure you keep this safely with the stock so nothing goes wrong with any of this and it doesn't go missing, it doesn't wander off. You want to make sure that you've got everything exactly where you expect it to be when you go to reinstall this. It'd be a shame to not be able to have this on the rifle because you lost a little part. So make sure you keep track of that stuff. Your kit's going to come in 2 primary pieces. It is most likely that this will be already attached to the main body. But if it isn't, I would leave it off to start with because I think it's lighter and easier to work with when you're doing the install without this on. If this is on in the box, I would take it off. Then you're going to have the main part. You've got the front rail, which actually is a separate piece from what's sort of the action here. If for some reason, maybe you're buying it secondhand, these two have been disconnected. There are 6 identical bolts that just put the 2 pieces together. So that's really, really easy to take care of. These should be snug. There's no need to make these gorilla tight. You could use a dab of thread locker on there if you wanted to, if you were worried about it. But they make a pretty secure connection, and they feed in to one another, kind of like overlapping puzzle pieces. So they're locked in really, really tightly. But this is where we start. Now, in some cases, somebody thinks they've helped you and they have put on the AR grip adapter. I say they think they've helped you because you actually have to follow the order here. And if you don't, there's going to be, well, you're just not going to be able to secure the 2 separately. So there is some back and forth that has to take place. So let's get that started. If this is pre-installed, if this little triangle guy is pre-installed and it sits right here, if that's been pre-installed, just unthread these 2 screws. You got one short and one long. Unthread those, let that drop off, and set the screws aside. So we're going to put the action into the chassis. That slides in just like that. And then you can roll it over and the long screw, okay, you've got two of these button head screws. One is significantly longer than the other, really obvious, okay? The long one goes in the front, and that's the one you're going to put in first. You'll of course want to grab the correct Allen, as I have not. It's a 4mm, and I'm going to tighten this in just until it stops. Then you can take the short one, and this drops in just behind the trigger guard. And that one is a 3mm. I'm going to put that one in until it stops. And then what I'm going to do is just like a quarter turn at a time, work these back and forth until I have them slugged down or snugged down. Now this is what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to put this on sideways and like crank on it. Okay, it doesn't need that much force. I've got that snugged. I've got that snugged. And the rifle's in the chassis. Now on to this piece. So this is going to screw under here, and that's going to allow us to thread on an AR-15 grip. Got nice wide. I'm using a bag here, so that's pretty easy. In this case, when we were doing the last bit, the long bolt went to the front. In this case, the long bolt goes to the rear. So I'm going to grab that long bolt, put that in there, make sure they're ready to go. And this is a 2.5 Allen. Nothing needs to be over tightened here, and depending on your use case, if you're the kind of person who does this transition a lot, I wouldn't put any thread locker on this. If you're saying, nope, I'm putting it in this and it's going to stay in this for the foreseeable future, you might use a dab of thread locker on there. So I've got that one, so it's just not even snug, just it bottomed out. And then there's a gap, and it's necessary in order to make this work. There's a gap behind the action and the back of this metal part for the chassis. And what I'm going to do is put this shorter screw down through that hole. And what happens to me 9 out of 10 times is it drops off the tool and falls head first into the hole, which makes it impossible to work with. So my adaptation for this, which is not great for filming, but it works well for getting it done, is to turn this up and drive it in that way. And I'm going to turn this one just until I hit bottom. And then what I can do is go back and forth and tighten these down so that I get it nice and perfectly even between the two. Again, doesn't need to be gorilla tight, not going to over torque this. just want to get to the place where they're snugged, bottomed out, and now that's ready for a grip to go on. So moving right along, this is not a super long process. I do have one more piece to put on, and that's this cover on the back of the action. What this does is covers up the space where the bolt or the probe moves back when you cock the rifle. So you'll see that this is hollowed out, and that's necessary. It's necessarily hollowed out because the bolt probe and the hammer have to come back and it fills up the space. So the back of this is fairly thin, and even if I was going to change this around a lot, this is where I would probably take a drop of thread locker and put it on this screw. Now, you are only actually going to bite by about 2 threads, so it's really important that you don't over tighten this because you'll strip out the back of this. But this has to be fairly thin back here because it has to accommodate that bolt moving in that space. So you're not going to put this on very tight. You're not going to find that it is a 3mm. You are not going to find that it takes a lot. It is not like holding the action in. It's just covering this space here. So don't over tighten that. You will strip it out. Don't do that. Okay, we've got the rifle in the chassis, and now we can turn our attention to the grip. Okay. So in this case, using this beautiful gold Saber Tactical PRS style vertical grip, and you have a hole in there and then a slot in the back. The hole is for this bolt to go through. And if you're good at like those skill crane games, you're gonna love this. And then this needs a 5mm wrench, and that wrench actually goes through the slot so that you can line up on the bolt. And then this moves forward. As you screw in this bolt, and this is super important, look how there is no resistance. This is because it's going in on an angle. This is a super easy thread to strip out. You should be able to do this with no resistance going in. In fact, you should probably be at a point where I am right now where you're like, am I actually really even going into the hole? But I am. And you can snug this one up. Again, you don't have to put ridiculous amounts of torque on it, but you want to get that snug. You don't want any movement in there. But if you cross thread that, it's game over, and it's fairly easy to do. So if you start turning it and there's a little bit of resistance, back off. You're bringing that bolt down, I don't know, maybe a 60-degree angle into the hole. You need to make sure you line that up properly. So we have the chassis, we have the rifle mounted to it, and now we can put on the power wheel as well as our safety. So let's move the camera and let's do that. Installing the safety is really easy. You just need to set the new, and remember this is the shorter one. It has less distance to travel. You just need to set that in the gap. And then with a 2.5mm Allen, you can screw that down. just going to put my finger there so that the screw can bottom out. And that's all set like that. I've been asked a couple times if it's possible to change this so it's up and back. It doesn't really fit that way, so down is safe, forward is fire. Next is to put the power wheel back in, and to do that we need to rotate this over. I'll try and do it as best I can so you can see it. But what we have to do is reinstall the springs. And like most things, it's a little bit easier if you're not trying to film it while you're doing it. So I'm just using my pick to get those in the hole. The big thing is just not losing them. And then, so I've got my ball bearings in place. They stayed in place. There's enough kind of grease in there. So once I make sure that the hammer spring probe is out of the way, just put that back on there. Make sure the ball bearings go into the right spot on the springs. Take my 2mm Allen, drop that bolt in there. Fortunately, there's not enough space for it to flip over on me, or surely it would. And then I just tighten that down. There is no like solid bottom out of this. You want to screw it so that there is tension against those ball bearings. But if you tighten it too far, it'll be hard to turn. So it is sprung in there, so you can back it out a little bit if it's too tight for you. Now we can reattach, or maybe it's attaching for the first time, the buttstock. And that's fairly straightforward. You've got one hinge pin on top and one hinge pin there. And all you need to do is line everything up and let it close. And there you go. To take it off, get that guy out of the way, open it up, drop it out. As simple as that. To open and close it, it's a simple matter of pushing this button open, and it'll close by itself. And if by chance yours is not perfect, those two screws right there can be loosened, and then you have the ability to move this forward and back just a little bit to tune the connection between the action and the buttstock. It slides back and forward ever so, just a little tiny bit. Before I reattach the scope, there is one other thing that I would do, and that is to set the bumper screw on the front. Now this one is one I might put either a little bit of Loctite, or I might take a round of Teflon tape on there just to make sure it stays. And this is a 5/32, so you do have to have an imperial set. But basically what you want to do is just turn this so that plastic nub connects to your bottle. And what that's going to do is take out any, you don't want to put pressure on it, you just want to get it to that point where it's making contact with your bottle. And what that's going to do is take out any last remaining flex in that rail. It's optional. You could take them out, not use them at all, but it's one of those nice to have it if you're concerned about any of that flex. This is a really stiff rail system. Even without it, you can put quite a bit of forward pressure on it without doing anything. And it's all really solidly tied in. So I don't have any worries, but some customers have asked about a way to take out that little extra bit of flex, and so Saber has come forward with it. I would probably go ahead and remount my scope, and then I would take a look at the adjustments on the back. So as long as we're here, might as well do that. I'm going to have a scope on in 5, 4, 3, 2. All right, scope is on. So what adjustments do we have? All right, first is cheek riser. So you've got a bunch of different step adjustments, and the point of an adjustable cheek riser is so that you get your cheek weld, which is unique to everybody's different face, but you get your cheek weld so that you're coming in and exactly going so that your eye is looking down the center of the scope. If you're too low or too high, you're going to see fringing around the scope. You're not going to get a clear picture, and it's going to be awful for shooting. So we get that set. This is a good height for me. Okay? Next adjustment is length of pull. Length of pull is how far back do you want the buttstock into your shoulder? And some of that is going to influence where the scope is, right? So if I go this far back, what happens is my eye is outside of the eye box for the scope. The eye box is sort of the range where you can see clearly down the tube. So that's too much for me. That's about perfect. It's also about comfort between your shoulder, your arm, and where your hand rests on the gun. So some people, larger people, longer arm people, like they are in a more natural shooting position farther back. Now for me, I'd have to move the scope back to make this work. But I don't usually shoot that far away, and so that position is going to be just fine for me. You also have the ability to move the butt pad up or down, which again will influence where this and this are when they line up. For me on the chassis, and I've shot these chassis quite a bit, for me, I always have it bottomed out. And then for my shoulder, I'm either in the number 4 or the number 3 position. So that's all set up, ready to go, and we'd be ready to head out to the range, confirm our zero or re-zero, and get some shooting in. So I did, when the chassis first came out, I did an installation video for Saber Tactical. That was prior to me having any affiliation with them. In full disclosure, I work for Donnie FL and Saber Tactical now. So they're really the sponsors for this video. I loved the chassis when I first got it. I've used it to great effect out doing pest control work. I can shoot all day behind this when I put it into a tripod. I've got a big 2Vets gear tripod, and it's amazing. It's an amazing tripod. I've shot, really steep angle up on silos. The tripod is really, really tall and does a great job. It's in fact, it is my absolute favorite tripod. I've used the chassis for that. Last year, 2022, the Rocky Mountain Airgun Challenge winner was shooting a Crown in a Saber Tactical chassis. It was the original version of it. I saw a number of shooters out at Rocky Mountain Airgun Challenge in 2023 shooting Crowns out of the chassis. It's a great, solid platform for competition. And it absolutely makes it look like the kind of airgun Batman would shoot. I think the adjustments they've made for this version of it are great, especially because this hinge is significantly improved. It's easier to adjust by yourself. It's easier to open, easier to close, and you can disassemble it, which is phenomenal. I think the inclusion of the stop pin for your safety makes a big difference. That's a good addition. And I really like the enhanced ARCA rail, much wider than it used to be. And I think just that little bit stiffer based on its design. Also the possibility that you could use that as a stop plate, I think helps if what you shoot is PRS. While I am Donnie Saber an employee, this is also my channel. So I'm free to be critical. It's unfortunate that there isn't more clearance space in here so that you could put that screw in just a little, through a few more threads. Be careful with that. I would hate to see you strip that out. The other thing that I think needs to be noted, and I'll give you a close-up picture of this, but when they redesigned this so that it was wider, the closure here is magnetic. The two magnets don't touch because this is a little bit wider than it was on the original one. So it does catch like that, and like this obviously would hold, but if I turn the gun over and let it hang, it's going to come open. You might be able to put your own magnet in there and get it to stay. If you're carrying it around like this for whatever reason, it'll hold. There's enough magnetic juice to hold it together, but it won't fully hold itself closed like it will on the original version. And again, I am free to be independent. It's my channel. That would be really my only criticism of the redesign. I do know, and you can take me at my word on this, there's a limited number of these that have been produced. And I don't think there's any, I know there is no plan right now. Once these are gone, this is going to be a discontinued product. I'm sure there will be new chassis stuff. I know there is a chassis for the raw, and there's some other cool stuff in the pipeline. But I talked to a lot of people in the airgun industry. There is currently a lot of demand for this, and I expect them to go pretty quickly. So if it's something you've had your eyes on for a while, you have this opportunity right now to get what's arguably a better version than the original one. But if you miss your chance, that chance might be gone. So something to think about. I think that's about it. If you have questions, put them in the comments below. If you've stuck it out to this point, thank you. It's great when you put together content and you actually see that people are watching it. But I do appreciate the views and the likes and the positive comments and questions. So if you have them, throw them in YouTube. I know YouTube likes to see that there's engagement, and that's sort of how things move forward. I think information like this on how to put a product together to get it out to use is critical, because it's seen by YouTube a lot of times as firearms content, even though this isn't. This is an air gun. They don't like assembly instructions, so it kind of dings the channel when I film stuff like this. But I'm glad to do it because I want to make sure you guys get the information. So thanks for watching, everybody, and until the next one, shoot safe, shoot straight, and I'll see you around. By loosening these two bolts using a 2.5 millimeter Allen wrench, you can adjust the buttstock forward or back to get an absolutely perfect made-up between these two parts. And that ability will allow you to take up any slop in this